The Misty Mountains rise like jagged teeth against the horizon, their peaks shrouded in veils of swirling mist that seem alive, shifting and curling as if guarding ancient whispers. They dominate the land, their massive forms both a physical and spiritual boundary. Travelers speak of their first glimpse with equal parts awe and dread, a feeling that stirs deep in the chest, like standing at the edge of the world where anything might happen. Legends say these mountains are older than time itself, formed not just of stone and earth but of ancient wills, shaped by forces beyond human understanding. Their ridges are scarred by storms so fierce that they sing, a haunting melody carried on the winds that howl through hidden passes. Each peak seems to loom with purpose, as if watching, waiting, and judging all who dare approach. Tales of the Misty Mountains fill the fireside nights of children and warriors alike. Some say the mist itself is alive, born of the tears of forgotten gods who mourned a lost world. Others whisper of strange figures glimpsed within the swirling fog, colossal shapes moving with the slow inevitability of glaciers, their footfalls shaking the ground like distant thunder. Few claim to have seen them and lived to tell the tale, yet their presence feels undeniable. They are the mountain's guardians, or perhaps their prisoners. There is an energy in these lands that cannot be tamed. It pulls at the edges of perception, a subtle pressure that grows heavier the closer one comes. For those who dare tread the trails winding through these craggy slopes, the silence is both oppressive and deafening. No birds sing here, no animals scurry, as if the mountains demand reverence and absolute stillness. Even the bravest travelers have been known to speak of a cold that sinks deeper than the skin, a biting chill that seems to gnaw at the soul itself. Long ago, when the world was young, the Misty Mountains were thought to hold the threads of fate. Wise men would climb their perilous heights, hoping to glean a vision of the future, though few returned. The ones who did often spoke in riddles, their minds fractured by what they had seen, or claimed to see. Were the mountains showing them the truth, or was it some cruel illusion spun by ancient forces still lingering among the peaks? The line between myth and reality has always blurred here. For centuries, wanderers have sworn they've heard voices echoing in the mist, low and mournful like the groaning of the earth itself. Some say these are the cries of those who ventured too far and were swallowed by the mountains. Others believe it is the call of something far older, something that watches from the highest peaks where no mortal has ever set foot. Even the stars seem to shy away from the tallest spires, their light dimmed as if out of respect or fear. Legends persist that during violent storms, colossal figures emerge from the mist. These aren't ordinary storms, they come suddenly, with black clouds roiling as though summoned by wrath. Thunder cracks not like a sound but a force that could split mountains, and boulders tumble as if hurled by unseen hands. It's during these moments, when lightning illuminates the peaks, that travelers have claimed to see them, giants of stone, their forms blending with the craggy cliffs, their movements slow and deliberate yet filled with a strength that feels eternal. The sight is said to drain the warmth from a person's blood, leaving only terror and awe. Villages that nestle at the mountain's base have their own stories, passed down through generations. They speak of offerings left at hidden shrines, small cairns of stones, tokens meant to appease the unseen forces that dwell in the mists. These rituals aren't born of superstition alone. Too many strange things have happened to ignore. Crops fail without warning, livestock vanish, and voices echo where there should be none. The elders speak of balance, of keeping the mountains content, though no one dares claim to fully understand what that means. Children grow up staring at the distant peaks, forbidden to climb too high or wander too close. The mountains are not a place for the curious or the foolhardy, they are sacred, untouchable. Yet, there are always those who feel the pull, an unexplainable need to go further, to climb higher. Some return with haunted eyes, speaking of visions that can't be put into words. Others are never seen again. The mountains take who they will, without reason or remorse. The Misty Mountains are not merely a place, they are a force, a living presence that humbles all who stand in their shadow. There is no certainty here, only questions that grow louder the longer one lingers. The air carries a weight, a promise, as though the mountains themselves are deciding whether to reveal their truth or keep it buried beneath the mist for all eternity. And then, in the stillness, the first rumble echoes, a sound too deep to be thunder, too rhythmic to be random. The world was still young, its bones unformed and raw. Mountains erupted from the earth like great fists raised to the sky, their jagged peaks a challenge to the heavens. The air crackled with energy, and the ground trembled as if it, too, was alive. It was in this chaos, this seething, molten cradle, that the stone giants were born. The ancients say their creation was not an accident but an act of will. The earth groaned beneath the weight of its own potential, and from its depths came a force so primal, so vast, that it could no longer be contained. It began with a quake that shook the foundation of existence. Stone split, and from its broken heart emerged shapes, titanic, rough-hewn forms that seemed to draw breath from the molten rivers beneath the earth. Some say it was the work of an ancient god, a being of unimaginable power who shaped the stone giants from the bones of the earth and infused them with a fragment of its eternal spirit. This god, whose name has long been forgotten, poured its strength into each towering figure, imbuing them with a purpose no mortal could understand. Others whisper that the giants were born not of a god's will but from the mountains themselves, a manifestation of their silent rage and sorrow. Perhaps the truth is something far more terrible, something no story dares to tell. The giants were unlike anything the world had seen. Their bodies were vast slabs of rock, their limbs carved by the relentless wind and rain. They moved with a slowness that spoke of timeless strength, each step resonating like the tolling of a great bell. Their eyes, it is said, glowed faintly, like embers hidden deep within the ash. To look into them was to feel the weight of the mountains pressing against your soul, as if the giants carried all the grief and fury of the earth within them. The myths tell of a time when the stone giants roamed freely, their towering forms a shadow on the horizon, their voices like rolling thunder. They were builders and destroyers, shaping the land with their bare hands. Rivers changed course under their command, and mountains rose where they rested. But their power was not unbridled chaos, it was purposeful, deliberate, like the grinding of tectonic plates that would one day form continents. There are whispers that the stone giants were not solitary beings. They were bound to the elements, their existence intertwined with forces older than the stars. Fire coursed through their veins, a remnant of the molten core from which they were born. Water polished their rough exteriors, shaping them over millennia. The wind hollowed their edges, giving them form and voice. And the earth, solid, unyielding, was both their body and their essence. Some believe the stone giants were protectors, guardians of the fragile balance that sustained the young world. They stood watch over the mountains and valleys, ensuring that no force, mortal or divine, could tip the scales. Others tell darker tales, stories of giants consumed by rage, their massive hands capable of leveling forests and shattering cliffs. Were they saviors, or were they destroyers? Perhaps they were both, for the earth itself is neither kind nor cruel. The most haunting stories speak of their voices. On still nights, it is said, you can hear the low, mournful hum of the stone giants echoing through the mountains. It's not a language as we know it, but something older, deeper, a vibration that seems to come from the core of existence. Those who have heard it say it stirs something primal within, a sense of longing, of connection to a time before time. And then there is the other sound, the one no one wishes to hear, a roar so loud it shatters stone and brings avalanches crashing down. It is the sound of anger, of the earth rising up against those who have forgotten its power. There is a story that has endured through the ages, whispered in the dark corners of mountain villages. It tells of a time when the stone giants went to war, not with men, but with each other. The earth shook for days as they clashed, their blows splitting peaks and carving valleys. No one knows what sparked the conflict, only that it ended with the giants retreating into the mist, their colossal forms disappearing into the mountains. Some say they sleep, their massive bodies hidden in plain sight, mistaken for hills and cliffs. Others believe they watch and wait, their spirits bound to the land, their rage simmering just beneath the surface. The old ones claim the giants are not truly gone. They are part of the mountains, their essence woven into the very fabric of the earth. When the mist thickens, when the ground rumbles and the wind screams, it is a reminder that they are still there, waiting. And when the storm comes, when lightning cleaves the sky and boulders tumble down the slopes, it is said that the giants are stirring once more. Their time is not over, it has simply been paused. In the stillness of the mist-laden peaks, where the sun's light falters and the wind howls like a lamenting spirit, there exists a world hidden from mortal eyes. A faint tremor courses through the ground, not an earthquake, but footsteps, heavy and deliberate, moving with purpose. If you listen closely, you might hear the low rumble of voices, ancient and resonant, harmonizing with the mountain's eternal song. This is the domain of the stone giants, where life exists beyond the comprehension of mortal hearts. Their lives are not solitary as the world might assume. Beneath their towering forms lies a society as intricate as the veins of quartz that run through the mountains they call home. Each movement, each sound, speaks of an unspoken bond, a connection that transcends language and time. Their existence is a dance of tradition and necessity, carried out with the rhythm of the earth itself. They do not build homes in the way humans do, for their bodies are their shelters, impervious to the elements. Instead, they gather in hidden sanctuaries carved by eons of wind and water, colossal chambers within the mountains that echo with their presence. These places are sacred, their walls bearing the faint impressions of hands so massive that a single print could swallow a man whole. It is here that their lives unfold, shrouded in secrecy and steeped in ritual. Hierarchy among the stone giants is not imposed through power or fear, but woven into the essence of their being. The eldest among them, their forms weathered and cracked like ancient cliffs, hold a wisdom unmatched by any living creature. These elders, known simply as the Old Ones, are revered not for their strength, but for their connection to the past. Their every word is a story, their every gesture a lesson. To stand before them is to feel the weight of millennia pressing against your chest, a reminder that the earth endures beyond all else. The younger giants, their forms smoother and less defined, look to the Old Ones for guidance. They move with an eagerness that contrasts the deliberate pace of their elders, their every action a reflection of their thirst to understand their place in the world. They gather stones from the mountains, not out of need but as an act of reverence, shaping them into patterns whose meanings are known only to their kind. These creations are not art in the human sense, but something far deeper, a conversation with the earth itself. Their traditions are carried out in silence, for words are seldom needed. When the mists are thickest and the peaks seem to float in a sea of clouds, they gather in a circle, their immense forms casting shadows that ripple like waves. In the center of this circle lies a stone, smooth and luminous, its surface etched with lines that seem to shift and shimmer. The giants touch this stone one by one, their massive hands lingering as if to draw strength from its core. This ritual, ancient beyond memory, binds them to each other and to the mountains they protect. Yet, for all their strength and size, the giants are not immune to sorrow. They grieve in ways that make the earth itself tremble. When one of their own falls, a rare but inevitable event, the mountains weep. Landslides and avalanches are not mere accidents of nature but expressions of their loss, the land mourning with them. The fallen are not buried but become part of the landscape, their forms blending with the cliffs and peaks, ensuring that they remain forever connected to their kin. The stone giants are not bound to one place, for their lives are a nomadic existence shaped by the whims of the earth. They move through the mist-shrouded peaks with a purpose that seems inscrutable to mortal eyes. Some say they follow the whispers of the wind, the call of the earth's veins as they shift and change. Others believe their movement is tied to the stars, their steps aligned with celestial patterns too vast for human minds to grasp. Whatever the reason, their paths are deliberate, each step a testament to their bond with the land. They are not cruel, though their presence can be terrifying. Travelers who have crossed their paths speak of an overwhelming sense of insignificance, as if standing before the mountains themselves. Few have seen them and lived to tell the tale, for the giants have no love for intrusions into their sacred spaces. Yet, those rare souls who return speak of moments that linger in the heart, a massive hand brushing against the earth, leaving behind a pattern so intricate it seems to hum with life. A sound, low and mournful, that resonates in the bones long after it fades. In the silence of the peaks, where the air is thin and the ground feels alive, the giants live as they always have. Their existence is a testament to the enduring power of the earth, a reminder that even in the face of time's relentless march, there are forces that remain unbroken. The wind carries their whispers, the stones bear their touch, and the mountains themselves seem to hold their breath, waiting for the moment when the giants will rise once more. Amid the stillness of the towering peaks, where the air is thick with mist and silence, there lies a hum, a vibration so faint it feels like a heartbeat pressed against the soles of your feet. It doesn't come from the wind or the earth's restless movement, but something older, something alive. This is how they speak. The language of the stone giants is unlike any sound heard by human ears. It is not merely a matter of voice or gesture, but a resonance that carries meaning through stone and air. Words, for them, are not shaped by breath, but carved into existence. A single syllable, spoken in their deep, rumbling tones, can shift the ground beneath your feet or send cracks racing across a mountainside. Their voices do not echo, they imprint themselves, lingering as a mark of their presence. But they speak sparingly, for their language is not meant to be wasted. Instead, they rely on gestures, movements so subtle that only those who watch closely can understand their weight. A tilt of the head, a shift of the hand, a deliberate pause, all of these convey volumes. Their gestures flow like water over stone, smooth and deliberate, as though every motion has been practiced for centuries. Then, there is the language of the earth itself, their true voice. To the giants, the land is a canvas, and stone is their ink. They speak through rock formations, creating shapes that hold meaning only they fully understand. An archway carved into a cliffside may be a greeting, while a jagged row of stones, positioned with careful intent, could be a warning or a memory. Travelers often mistake these formations for the random acts of nature, but to the giants, they are sentences written in a script as old as the mountains. The process of creating these stone messages is a ritual. It begins with silence, the giants standing motionless as though listening to something hidden deep within the rock. When the moment feels right, they move, not with tools, but with their immense hands, shaping and molding stone as easily as clay. They do not rush, the weight of time does not press upon them as it does upon men. Hours, days, or even weeks may pass as they work, their focus unwavering. Each touch is deliberate, each strike calculated, and when they step back, the stone bears a message etched with their intent. Not all of these messages are meant for others. Some are conversations with the mountains themselves, a form of communion between the giants and the land. The mountains respond, though not in ways that human senses can perceive. A boulder shifts slightly, a fissure appears where there was none, or the earth trembles faintly underfoot. These are not mere coincidences, but answers, a dialogue carried out in the language of stone. The giants also communicate with one another through vibrations, a method that is both subtle and profound. They press their hands against the ground, sending waves of energy that travel far beneath the surface. These vibrations carry meaning, reaching other giants miles away. To those unknowing, the tremors may feel like earthquakes, but they are conversations, messages shared in a way that bypasses the need for sight or sound. Through this, they share warnings, stories, and emotions, all carried by the earth's ancient heartbeat. Even in silence, their presence speaks volumes. The sheer size and placement of their gatherings create an energy that lingers long after they have moved on. Travelers who stumble upon these spaces speak of an indescribable feeling, as though the stones themselves are whispering truths they cannot fully grasp. It is not fear they feel, but awe, a sense of standing in the presence of something vast and eternal. Yet, for all their strength and power, their language is not one of dominance. It carries with it a deep respect for the land they inhabit and the forces that shaped it. When they speak, whether through gesture, vibration, or stone, they do so with care, as though each word or motion could alter the world in ways they do not intend. It is a reminder that even the strongest must tread lightly, for the earth, though ancient and enduring, is not invincible. Their communication is not limited to their kind. Though rare, there are tales of times when the giants have spoken to other creatures of the mountains, eagles, wolves, even the wind itself. These moments are fleeting and shrouded in mystery, but those who witness them describe a connection so profound it feels as though the world itself is holding its breath. In this way, the stone giants exist as both creators and keepers of the language of the earth. Their words, whether spoken, gestured, or carved, are not mere sounds or shapes but echoes of a bond that stretches back to the beginning of time. To hear them is to feel the weight of the mountains, the endless patience of stone, and the quiet, enduring strength of a world that has seen countless lifetimes pass like shadows. The air thickens with a silent charge, and the ground begins to tremble, not violently, but like a heartbeat, slow and steady. Then, a shadow moves across the mountainside, its enormity blending into the mist until it seems the land itself has taken form. They don't merely walk upon the earth, they command it, tethered to its every pulse, their presence bending the world around them. The stone giants carry within them a power that feels less like a gift and more like an extension of the land. Their abilities are raw, elemental, and bound to the ancient forces that have shaped the mountains for millennia. With a mere gesture, they can summon rockslides that roar like thunder, sending boulders cascading in a dance of destruction and renewal. It is not anger or malice that drives these movements, but necessity, a reminder that the earth, though still and silent, is alive and unpredictable. Their connection to stone is unmatched. To others, stone is cold and unyielding, a dead thing shaped by hands and tools. But to the giants, it breathes. They hear its whispers, the stories locked within its layers, and they mold it as if it were clay warmed by the sun. A simple touch of their fingers can reshape a cliff face or carve a cavern, their strength guided not by brute force, but by an intimate understanding of the stone's nature. Every crevice, every crack holds a purpose, crafted with intention. When the sky darkens, and storms gather above the peaks, the giants do not retreat. They stand tall, their immense forms seeming to merge with the tempest, as if they are part of its very fabric. The wind howls around them, rain pounding against their rocky skin, but they do not waver. It is said that their footsteps can summon storms, their movements coaxing clouds to gather and lightning to strike. Yet, their powers over the weather are not acts of chaos, they are moments of balance, where the giants shift the skies to restore harmony to a disrupted world. The giant's presence leaves more than impressions in the earth, it transforms the environment itself. When they walk, the ground beneath them is forever altered, their steps pressing deep into the soil, shaping paths that become rivers or valleys. They do not take lightly the impact of their actions. In their wake, life often flourishes, plants growing more vibrant in the cracks of rocks they've touched, streams carving new paths through landscapes they've shaped. It's as if their power carries with it a pulse of creation, a balance that ensures their strength does not become destruction alone. The most awe-inspiring displays of their abilities are said to occur when they gather, their combined presence stirring the elements into a symphony of earth and sky. These gatherings are rare and shrouded in mystery, but those who have dared to watch from a distance tell tales of mountains shifting and clouds parting, as if the giants are calling upon forces older than time. The air becomes electric, charged with a power that makes the heart race and the skin tingle, as though the world itself is responding to their presence. For all their strength, there is a gentleness to how the giants wield their power. A landslide might seem destructive, but in its aftermath, the earth finds new forms, new paths. When they touch stone, they do so with reverence, their immense hands moving as carefully as a sculptor with their chisel. They do not command the land as conquerors, but as caretakers, their every action a reflection of their deep respect for the world that sustains them. Their powers are not without consequence. When they summon storms or shift the land, it is felt for miles around. Creatures flee, rivers overflow, and forests tremble, caught in the ripple of their actions. Yet, even in the midst of such chaos, there is a strange beauty, a reminder of the raw, unbridled power of nature, and the giants' place as its guardians. They are a force, but not one of malice. To stand in their shadow is to feel both the weight of the earth and the lightness of its renewal, a paradox that is as humbling as it is overwhelming. And still, they remain enigmatic. No one knows whether their powers are bestowed upon them by ancient deities or if they were born from the mountains themselves, their abilities as natural as the rivers that carve through stone. But one thing is certain, their strength is not separate from the land, it is the land, channeled and made manifest through their immense forms. The power of the stone giants is not just in what they do, but in what they mean. They remind the world that even the strongest forces must exist in harmony, that strength is not measured by what is broken, but by what is built. As the mist settles over the peaks once more, hiding their forms from view, the echoes of their actions linger in the air, a quiet promise that the mountains are never truly silent. The fire burned low, casting flickering shadows on the cave walls as the old man spoke, his voice steady yet laden with an undertone of unease. "They don't come to harm you, not unless they have reason," he said, staring into the flames as if seeing something far away. "But cross them, disturb the mountains, and you'll never forget their wrath." The others in the group leaned closer, the crackle of the fire the only sound for a moment. This was not the first time a story of the stone giants had been shared, but something in the old man's tone made the air feel heavier. "I saw one once," he said, his voice dropping to a whisper. "Not a shadow, not a trick of the mist. A real one." He paused, as though reliving the moment, and the silence pressed on like a weight. When he finally spoke again, his words carried the vividness of someone recounting a nightmare. "I was no more than a boy. My father had warned me, never wander too far from the path, especially when the clouds hang low. But I was young, curious, and thought myself clever. I strayed, climbing higher and higher, until I was lost." His hand trembled slightly as he lifted his cup, taking a sip to steady himself. The mist was thick as wool, and I could hear rocks shifting. Not falling, mind you, shifting, like something massive was stirring them. Then I saw it. A hand, bigger than the boulders around me, reaching out to steady itself. The fingers were rough, like jagged stone, but they moved with purpose. And then, the face. The listeners barely breathed, hanging on every word. It wasn't human, but it wasn't a monster either. Its eyes glowed faintly, like embers deep in a fire pit. It looked at me, not with anger, but with something that felt ancient. Like it could see through me, past the boy I was, to something deeper. It didn't speak, not with words, but I felt it. It warned me to leave. He set his cup down, the clink loud in the quiet. I ran. I didn't stop until I was back in the village, and even then, I could feel those eyes on me. It let me go because I hadn't done anything wrong. But not everyone is so lucky. There are tales of travelers who have ventured into the Misty Mountains seeking treasure, glory, or forbidden knowledge, and not all of them lived to tell the tale. One story tells of a group of warriors who dared to mine the sacred stones of the giant's domain, ignoring the warnings carved into the rocks at the mountain's base. They boasted of their strength, mocking the myths as the superstitions of frightened villagers. But as they dug deeper, the earth began to quake, and the mist thickened until they could barely see their hands in front of them. Then came the sound, a low rumble that grew into a roar, as if the mountain itself was alive and enraged. They tried to flee, but the ground split beneath their feet, and boulders tumbled down with terrifying precision, cutting off every escape. Witnesses claimed that the few survivors stumbled back days later, their eyes hollow with terror. They spoke of enormous figures moving through the mist, their anger palpable. The warriors' greed had awakened something that should have been left undisturbed. Yet, not all encounters are marked by fear. There are stories, softer and rarer, of shepherds and wanderers who claim to have been saved by the giants. One shepherd spoke of a night when a fierce storm threatened to sweep his flock off the cliffs. Struggling against the wind and rain, he cried out for help, knowing no one could hear him. But then, through the darkness, a massive figure appeared, its form barely visible through the sheets of rain. The shepherd described how the giant moved the boulders with ease, creating a makeshift shelter to protect the sheep. When the storm passed, the giant was gone, leaving behind nothing but the reshaped stones and an overwhelming sense of gratitude in the shepherd's heart. He returned to the village, swearing that the giants were not just beings of strength, but also protectors, watching over those who respected the land. Legends often paint the giants as both guardians and destroyers, their roles shifting with the actions of those who encounter them. Some say they protect sacred places, their presence a warning to anyone who would dare defile the land. Others whisper that they are the mountain's way of punishing the arrogant, those who think they can bend nature to their will. In every story, though, there is a thread of respect, a reminder that the giants are not to be trifled with. A haunting tale speaks of a bard who climbed the peaks seeking inspiration. He carried only his lute and a pouch of bread, his heart full of songs waiting to be born. When he reached the summit, the mist enveloped him, and he found himself face to face with a giant. Instead of running, the bard played a tune, a melody that echoed the rhythm of the earth. The giant listened, unmoving, until the song ended. Then, without a word, it reached down and touched the ground, carving patterns into the rock with its massive fingers. The bard returned with a song unlike any other, a melody that resonated with the soul of the mountains. Some say the giant's carvings are still there, hidden in the mist, a testament to a rare moment of understanding between mortal and giant. Every encounter leaves its mark, not just on the land, but on the people who experience it. The giants are not merely creatures of stone and strength, they are reminders of the fragile balance between humanity and the natural world. To meet them is to face something greater than oneself, something that demands humility and reverence. And for those who survive, the memory of the giants lingers, etched into their hearts like the patterns they carve into the mountains. The battlefield was a nightmare of chaos and fury. The ground trembled as if alive, each vibration a harbinger of something immense and unstoppable. The soldiers, clad in gleaming armor, froze mid-charge, their battle cries strangled into silence. All eyes turned upward as a shadow engulfed the horizon, growing larger with each earth-shaking step. They came with the weight of the mountains themselves, towering figures of stone and earth, their jagged forms glinting faintly under the blood-red sky. The stone giants had entered the fray, and the tide of the battle shifted in an instant. For the mortals below, it was as if the heavens had unleashed their wrath, ancient and unyielding. Stories of such battles rippled through history, carried like whispers on the wind, each one brimming with awe and terror. The giants were neither friends nor foes by nature, their allegiance swayed only by forces they deemed worthy of their power. When they fought, they did so with a force that seemed less like war and more like the reordering of the earth itself. One tale speaks of the siege of Kael'thar, where armies of men and mythical beasts clashed for control of a city said to hold the heart of the mountains, a gem of unimaginable power. The defenders, hopelessly outnumbered, sent a desperate plea to the giants, leaving offerings of stone-carved tributes along the mountain paths. For days, nothing stirred. But as the invading army breached the final gates, a roar like grinding boulders erupted from the cliffs. The ground split open, swallowing whole battalions, as the giants emerged, their forms blending with the very stone of the mountains. The invaders' weapons shattered against their skin, and their war cries turned to screams. The giants' presence was not a savior's mercy, it was an overwhelming force of balance, ensuring that the greed for power would not taint the land. When the battle was over, the giants left as silently as they had come, their massive footprints the only evidence of their fury. But the giants were not always defenders. Some legends tell of darker alliances, times when the giants lent their strength to armies of destruction. In the War of the Shattered Peaks, they fought alongside the Shadow Fae, creatures of malice and cunning, against the Skyborn, a race of winged guardians who sought to protect the realms. The giants hurled boulders that tore through the clouds, bringing entire peaks crashing down, scattering the Skyborn forces. Yet even in these tales, their actions are painted not with cruelty but with a cold, unfeeling resolve. The giants did not revel in the chaos, they were simply forces unleashed, bound to their purpose by oaths forged in the ancient language of the stones. Their alliances were pragmatic, their loyalty as solid as the earth they embodied, until the tides of purpose shifted once more. One haunting account from the Battle of Solstice Ridge tells of a single giant standing amidst the carnage. The soldiers of both sides paused, swords raised but unused, as the giant knelt and placed its massive hand against the ground. The earth shook, and cracks spread like veins across the battlefield, forcing the warring factions to retreat. It was as if the giant had declared the land sacred, forbidding further bloodshed. That act of silent defiance left an indelible mark, a moment when even the fiercest warriors realized their insignificance in the face of such ancient power. There were times when the giants fought not for mortals but for the mythical races they considered kin. Their alliances with the earthbound druids are legendary, a bond forged in mutual reverence for the land. Together, they shaped the terrain, turning valleys into fortresses and rivers into barriers that protected entire civilizations. In the Great Drought Wars, the giants were said to have summoned rains by striking their massive fists into the ground, releasing water trapped deep within the earth. Their actions saved countless lives, though the cost was often the reshaping of the land itself, mountains crumbling to plains, and rivers carving new paths. Yet their loyalty had limits. When the Flameborn sought to enslave the giants, believing their power could be harnessed to fuel endless conquest, the giants responded with a vengeance that became the stuff of nightmares. Entire cities burned, not by fire, but by the crushing weight of collapsing mountains. The giants' retaliation was swift, decisive, and absolute, a warning etched into history that even the most ambitious would not soon forget. For those who stood witness to these battles, the memory of the giants was seared into their souls. Soldiers spoke of the sound of their movements, a low rumble that resonated deep in the chest, shaking bones and will alike. They described the eerie glow of their eyes, not cruel but heavy with the weight of millennia, as if seeing beyond the petty squabbles of mortals to the greater harmony they sought to preserve. And yet, there are whispers of a time when the giants vanished from the battlefields, retreating to the peaks shrouded in mist. Some say they grew weary of war, their patience worn thin by the endless cycle of greed and conflict. Others believe they await a time when their strength will be needed again, slumbering within the mountains themselves, their hearts beating in rhythm with the earth. The stories do not agree on what will bring them back. Will it be another great war, one that threatens the balance they hold sacred? Or will they rise not as allies, but as arbiters, deciding the fate of all who tread upon their land? The answers remain hidden, buried within the ancient folds of the earth. The sound of hammer against stone echoed through the caverns, a rhythm so steady it seemed to mirror the heartbeat of the mountain itself. Sparks danced in the dim glow of molten metal, illuminating the faces of the dwarves, masters of the underground, their hands as skilled as their spirits were unyielding. Each strike of their tools crafted weapons, artifacts, and wonders that would outlast time itself. Yet, beyond the labyrinth of their forges and mines, another force loomed, just as ancient, just as tied to the mountains, the giants. The air between them was often thick with tension, as though the rocks themselves held their breath when these two mighty races came close. Where the dwarves thrived in precision, wielding chisels to carve life from the unyielding stone, the giants moved with raw, untamed strength, their massive hands shaping the earth in ways no mortal could comprehend. One tale tells of a single peak, known to mortals as the Weeping Mountain, where both dwarves and giants claimed dominion. The mountain, rich in veins of silver and gold, became a symbol of their rivalry. The dwarves sought its treasures, delving deeper into the heart of the earth, carving grand halls and intricate tunnels. The giants, however, revered the mountain as a living entity, its towering form a testament to the power of the land itself. Conflict was inevitable. When the first clash came, it was not with weapons, but with words. The dwarves demanded the mountain for their craft, arguing that their creations honored the stone. The giants countered, their voices like rolling thunder, declaring that the mountain's beauty lay in its untouched majesty. Words soon gave way to action, and for days, the mountain trembled under the force of their quarrel. The dwarves, masters of strategy, laid traps and fortifications within their tunnels. The giants, in their might, tore boulders from the mountain's face and hurled them with such force that they reshaped entire valleys below. It was a battle not of hate but of unyielding pride, each side refusing to concede. Yet, even in the chaos, moments of reluctant admiration emerged. A dwarf, trapped beneath a collapsing tunnel, was rescued by a giant who lifted the debris with a single hand, muttering, "Even the stubborn deserve to live." Over time, their rivalry softened into something more complex. Where once there was only disdain, a grudging respect began to grow. The dwarves recognized the giants' profound connection to the land, and the giants marveled at the dwarves' ability to transform the earth's treasures into objects of wonder. The Weeping Mountain became a place not of conflict, but of collaboration, its name earned from the rivulets of water that cascaded down its slopes, as if it too had shed tears during those tumultuous days. Legends speak of an alliance forged in the shadow of another war, one that threatened to destroy all they held sacred. When an army of shadow creatures emerged from the depths, seeking to consume the mountains and all their inhabitants, the dwarves and giants set aside their differences. Together, they fought with a ferocity that shook the heavens. The giants, with their colossal strength, held back the tide of darkness, their massive forms standing like unbreakable walls. The dwarves, with their cunning and skill, crafted weapons imbued with the mountain's essence, blades that shimmered like starlight and shields as unyielding as the earth. Side by side, they turned the tide, and their shared victory forged a bond stronger than stone. Despite their alliance, their relationship remained complex. The dwarves, ever practical, often grew frustrated with the giants' seemingly careless reshaping of the land, seeing it as destruction rather than creation. The giants, in turn, viewed the dwarves' endless mining as greed, a desecration of the earth's sacred body. Yet, beneath the surface, they shared a connection that neither would openly admit, a love for the mountains, for the enduring strength of stone, and for the stories etched into every rock and boulder. One particularly poignant tale speaks of a giant and a dwarf who, against all odds, became friends. The dwarf, a master smith named Gorin, sought the heart of a fallen meteor, said to hold the purest metal known to the world. The meteor lay in a chasm too deep for any dwarf to reach. A giant, known as Kulfur, found Gorin struggling at the edge of the abyss and, with a rumbling laugh, offered his aid. Together, they retrieved the meteor, and Gorin forged from it a blade so perfect it seemed to hum with life. In gratitude, Gorin presented the blade to Kulfur, who used it not for war but to carve intricate designs into the stone of his home, a gesture that spoke of peace and understanding. The mountains themselves seemed to bear the marks of their intertwined history. Caverns filled with both giant-crafted carvings and dwarven forges told stories of cooperation and conflict. Peaks shaped by the giants' mighty hands stood alongside valleys carved by dwarven ingenuity, a testament to their shared legacy. Mortals who wandered these lands often spoke of a strange sense of balance, as if the mountains carried within them the spirits of both races, forever entwined. And so, the relationship between giants and dwarves remains one of contrasts, a dance of strength and precision, reverence and ambition. Their interactions have shaped not only the mountains but the very fabric of the world's lore, a reminder that even the greatest rivalries can give birth to something extraordinary. The cold wind swept through the valley, its howl like the distant echo of a giant's roar. On the face of a towering cliff, ancient hands had carved a story into the stone, a story of unyielding strength and endless endurance. Every groove told of storms weathered, battles fought, and the eternal dance between destruction and creation. The stone giants were not just legends, they were reminders, etched into the very bones of the earth. In the flickering light of village fires, elders would speak of them with reverence. Their voices, gravelly and deliberate, would weave tales that hung in the air like the smoke curling from their pipes. The giants were not just beings of colossal size and power, they were the embodiment of nature's raw, unforgiving beauty. To hear these stories was to feel the weight of the mountains pressing down, a reminder that life itself was a battle against the elements. Artists tried to capture their essence, though how could paint and brush ever hold the soul of something so immense? Still, they tried. On the walls of forgotten caves, crude yet powerful depictions of giants loomed over hunting scenes. Their eyes, carved as twin circles of shadow, seemed to follow you as you walked by, as if they knew your thoughts, your fears. Later, in grand halls, tapestries would tell their stories in brilliant hues of gold and gray. Giants stood as guardians at the edge of civilization, their forms blending with the wild landscapes they protected or threatened. The written word added its voice, shaping the giants in ways both terrifying and inspiring. Poets sang of their feet, which could crack open the earth, and their hands, capable of pulling trees from the ground as if they were mere weeds. In one epic, a giant is described standing against the onslaught of an endless winter, his breath forming storms, his heartbeat shaking the snow-laden hills. In another, a solitary giant mourns the loss of his kin, his tears carving rivers into the land, a reminder that even the strongest can feel sorrow. But it was in oral traditions that the giants lived most vividly. Every storyteller, from the seasoned elder to the wide-eyed child, added their own touch, their own belief. Some spoke of giants as guardians, protectors of the land who punished those who disrespected nature. They told of farmers whose greed led them to overwork the soil, only to wake one morning and find their fields barren, as if the giants themselves had swept through in anger. Others painted them as relentless destroyers, forces of chaos that tested humanity's will to survive. It was said that if you stood on a mountain peak at sunrise, you could hear their laughter in the wind, mocking the tiny creatures who dared to claim dominion over the land. Even their silence held meaning. When storms raged and lightning split the sky, some whispered that it was the giants speaking in a language too ancient for humans to understand. When an avalanche roared down a mountainside, it was their way of reminding the world of their power. And when the world was still, when not even the trees dared to sway, people spoke of giants resting, their massive forms hidden in plain sight as ridges and boulders. For many, the giants were not just figures of strength, but symbols of endurance. They stood unyielding against the passage of time, weathering the elements without complaint. This made them sacred to those who toiled in the fields, climbed the mountains, or braved the forests. To endure, to face hardship and remain standing, was to honor the spirit of the giants. In some villages, stones were piled into massive cairns, crude imitations of the giants themselves, as offerings to gain their favor or protection. The wilderness itself became their shrine. Towering rock formations were seen as their frozen remnants, their forms etched into the landscape by time's relentless hand. Forest clearings where no tree dared grow were thought to be places where giants had rested, their presence still lingering in the soil. Rivers that wound through jagged canyons were their pathways, carved in a time before human memory began. Yet, for all their strength, the giants also symbolized the fragility of balance. They reminded humanity that even the strongest can fall. Stories told of giants defeated by their own hubris, their immense power turning against them. One such tale spoke of a giant who sought to dam a river, piling stones higher and higher until the weight became too much, and the waters burst through, sweeping him away in a torrent of his own making. These stories carried a simple yet profound message: respect the forces greater than yourself, for they cannot be controlled. Among the people of the mountains, it was said that every giant held a story within them, a story written not in words, but in the scars of the land. Each crag and ridge was a line in their eternal saga, a reminder that the world was shaped not by fleeting moments, but by the slow, grinding power of time itself. To stand before a mountain was to stand before a giant, and to stand before a giant was to feel the weight of all that had come before. In this way, the stone giants were more than myth. They were a mirror, reflecting humanity's struggles, triumphs, and failures. They stood as guardians of the wilderness, warnings of its wrath, and symbols of its enduring strength. Their presence lingered in every storm, every mountain, every whispered story by the fire. And as long as the earth stood, so too would the giants, silent yet ever present, watching, waiting, enduring. On the coldest nights, when the world below seemed to hold its breath, the sky came alive. A tapestry of stars stretched endlessly, each one burning with ancient light. In those moments, it was easy to believe the heavens were more than mere points of light. They were windows to a world where giants roamed not the earth, but the cosmos. The stars seemed to whisper stories, tales that belonged to a time when mortals and stone giants shared the same horizon. Villagers would gather in open fields, their faces turned upward, wrapped in awe. Elders spoke of constellations shaped by the mighty forms of giants who had climbed into the heavens. Their bodies, too immense for the earth, found eternal rest among the stars, their silhouettes forever imprinted on the night sky. There was one constellation that drew every eye, the Colossus. Its massive figure dominated the northern sky, arms stretched wide as though holding the heavens themselves. Legends said the Colossus had been a giant who stood between two warring celestial tribes, sacrificing himself to keep the peace. His body was shattered by the clash of their powers, but the stars remembered his form, stitching it together so he could watch over the world forever. When the Colossus rose high in the sky, it was said to be a time for unity, for even the strongest could fall without harmony. In the east, a cluster of stars shimmered faintly, known as the Wanderer's Crown. This constellation told a different story, a tale of betrayal and redemption. The crown belonged to a giant who had sought to steal fire from the gods to give warmth to mortals during an eternal winter. For his defiance, he was struck down, his fiery heart cast into the heavens where it burned brightly among the stars. Those who saw the wanderer's crown on a freezing night would find solace, knowing that even in punishment, the giant's sacrifice brought them light and warmth. The ancients believed that the movements of the stars were the footsteps of the giants, echoing across the vault of the sky. When the constellations shifted, it was said that the giants were walking, their colossal strides too vast for human comprehension. Astronomers of old, both revered and feared, charted these movements with trembling hands, knowing that to trace the steps of the giants was to glimpse the mind of the universe itself. One myth spoke of a giant known as Silvara, the guardian of the celestial river. This giant was said to have created the Milky Way by dragging her massive hands through the darkness, scattering stars like grains of sand. Silvara's form could still be seen, they said, kneeling beside the great river of light, her eyes forever fixed on its sparkling waters. Her story was a warning, a reminder to tread carefully, for even the gentlest of actions could leave eternal marks. For ancient stargazers, the stars were not random, they were the eyes of the giants, watching over the world below. Some glowed with kindness, like old friends offering guidance through the darkest nights. Others burned fiercely, their intensity a warning to those who dared trespass against the natural order. To gaze into the heavens was to feel the weight of their gaze in return, a silent reminder of the power that lingered beyond the reach of mortal hands. It was not just the stars themselves that told these tales, but the spaces between them. The dark voids, the shadows that swallowed light, were said to be the slumbering forms of giants who had fallen in battle. Their vast bodies stretched across the cosmos, their outlines only visible when the stars drew near. To some, these sleeping giants were protectors, keeping the balance between light and dark. To others, they were a haunting reminder of the cost of defying forces greater than oneself. On certain nights, the sky held an unusual shimmer, as if the stars themselves were trembling. Those who watched closely believed they could see the giants moving, their celestial forms shifting ever so slightly. It was a sight both wondrous and terrifying, for it meant the giants were restless, their ancient struggles spilling into the mortal world. Even the moon, with its pale, cold light, was said to hold the touch of the giants. One story told of a giant who had tried to catch the moon in his hands, believing it was a pearl fallen from the crown of a sky goddess. When he reached out, his touch left craters, the moon's smooth surface forever marred by his grasp. Yet, the moon did not fall, instead, it rose higher, just beyond his reach, a reminder of the limits of even the mightiest hands. In the quiet moments before dawn, when the stars began to fade and the world seemed suspended between night and day, a strange calm settled over the earth. It was said this was the time when the giants spoke, their voices carried on the faint hum of the cosmos. They murmured of forgotten battles, ancient alliances, and the beauty of the world they once walked. To listen was to feel the weight of eternity pressing down, a reminder of how small, yet precious, each life truly was. And as the first light of day broke over the horizon, painting the sky in hues of gold and crimson, the stars would slowly vanish, taking their stories with them. But even in the daylight, their presence lingered, etched into the hearts of those who dared to look up and wonder. The giants had not disappeared, they were simply waiting, their tales written across the heavens, eternal and unchanging. The valley trembled with anticipation. Across the jagged expanse of stone and shadow, the giants stood like mountains given life. Their breaths were slow and deep, the sound of grinding boulders carried on the wind. Each one bore the weight of a legend, their names whispered by rivers and etched in the bark of ancient trees. Today was not a day for war or toil, today was for the wager. It began as a murmur, a challenge hurled across the vast silence. A boastful declaration from a younger giant, his voice loud and reckless as thunder. No hand is stronger than mine. No arm can hurl farther. The older giants turned to him, their massive brows furrowed in amusement. Challenges among their kind were rare, but when one was issued, it could not go unanswered. The wager was simple yet monumental, to prove strength, precision, and endurance by hurling the largest boulder across the great chasm. But it wasn't just a test of might, it was a battle of wills, a display of pride, and a testament to the bond that tied the giants together. Every boulder thrown told a story, and every crack it left in the earth was a reminder of their place in it. The giants chose their stones with care. These were no ordinary rocks. They were the bones of the mountains, ancient and unyielding. Each competitor approached the task with reverence, running their colossal hands over the rough surfaces, listening for the echoes of the stones past. The right boulder could carry not just strength, but the spirit of the giant who wielded it. When the time came, the air itself seemed to hold its breath. The first giant stepped forward, his frame casting a shadow that stretched for miles. He bent, gripping his chosen boulder, his fingers sinking into the rock like roots into soil. With a roar that shook the skies, he hurled it with all his might. The stone tore through the air, a black streak against the pale sky, before slamming into the earth on the far side of the chasm, sending shards of stone flying like stars. The giants nodded in approval, but the challenge had only begun. Another stepped forward, her figure as tall as the tallest peaks. Her gaze was steady, her movements deliberate. She chose a smaller stone, but one with a perfect balance. When she threw it, her precision was unmatched. The boulder arced gracefully, landing just beyond the first. A ripple of awe passed through the onlookers, for hers was not a throw of brute force, but one of calculated mastery. As the contest continued, the stakes grew higher. Each throw pushed the limits of what was thought possible. The earth groaned under the weight of their efforts, and the wind carried the echoes of their roars across the land. Yet, amid the fierce competition, there was camaraderie. Laughter boomed like distant avalanches when a throw fell short, and cheers erupted when a giant surpassed expectations. This was more than a wager, it was a celebration of their shared existence, their bond forged in stone and time. Then came the moment that would be sung of for generations. The oldest of the giants, his face weathered by countless storms, stepped forward. His movements were slow but deliberate, every step resonating with the wisdom of ages. He chose a boulder unlike any other, its surface gleaming with veins of crystal. It was a stone that seemed to hold the weight of the world, and yet he lifted it with ease, as though it were an extension of himself. The other giants fell silent as he prepared to throw. The world seemed to pause, the air heavy with expectation. When he finally let go, the boulder soared higher and farther than any before it. It flew beyond the chasm, beyond the mountains, disappearing into the horizon. For a moment, there was only silence, and then the sound of the stone landing far, far away, a deep, resounding thud that shook the very foundations of the earth. The giants erupted in cheers, their voices a symphony of joy and reverence. The old giant turned to them, his eyes shining with the pride not of victory but of unity. His throw was not just a display of strength, it was a reminder of what they were, of the enduring spirit that bound them to the land and to each other. And so, the contest ended, but its echoes remained. The boulders, scattered across the landscape, became monuments to that day, symbols of the giants' might and their enduring legacy. Each one bore the marks of its journey, the scratches, the cracks, the stories etched into its surface by the hands that had held it. The wager of the giants was more than a competition, it was a living testament to their spirit. It spoke of strength tempered with wisdom, of rivalry softened by camaraderie. And as the giants returned to their mountains, their laughter echoing across the valleys, the earth seemed to breathe a little easier, knowing that its guardians were not just powerful but bound by something deeper, something eternal. The first time they met, it was beneath the vast canopy of stars, where the mountains whispered old secrets to the wind. The stone giant stood, tall and silent, watching the shadows dance across the rocks. He was a figure carved from the very stone of the land, timeless, steady, enduring. But that night, something shifted in him, something different from the usual stillness of his existence. She came to the edge of the clearing, small against the towering form of the giant. A mortal, full of life and warmth, with eyes that shimmered like morning dew. Her hair was dark as the night sky, and her smile held the innocence of someone who had yet to see the weight of the world. She didn't seem afraid, not of the towering figure before her, not of the unyielding mountains that stretched behind him. The moment their eyes met, it felt as if time itself had paused. The air grew thick with something neither had encountered before: curiosity, desire, a longing neither could fully understand. Words did not need to be spoken, they could feel the unspoken bond forming between them, stronger than anything the earth or sky could have separated. The giant, though rooted in stone, found himself moved in a way he never expected. He had always been alone, apart from the rest of the world. Yet, with her, he began to see beauty in the smallest things: the shimmer of water in a hidden pool, the soft rustle of leaves underfoot. She opened his eyes to the world beyond the rocks, beyond the mountains, and in her presence, he began to dream. Their love grew quietly, like the slow unfolding of flowers in the warmth of spring. She would visit him when the mountains were still, when the air was heavy with dusk, and the shadows crept long across the peaks. In those stolen moments, they would share stories, the tales of their homelands, the dreams they carried inside. She spoke of sunlight, of laughter, of simple joys that had always felt distant to him. And he, in turn, told her of the mountains, the stones that sang to the winds, the ancient rocks that remembered the whispers of time itself. But love, as beautiful as it was, had never been easy for those from such different worlds. Slowly, the weight of their union began to show itself. The other giants, once silent observers of his solitude, grew uneasy. They could feel the shift in the balance, the strain on the threads that had long kept them connected to the land. For the giants, love between one of their own and a mortal was not just unheard of, it was dangerous. Mortals were fleeting, their lives like a spark compared to the vast, enduring life of a giant. The union of such vastly different beings could upset more than hearts, it could disrupt the very forces that governed the land. And so, warnings began to spread among their kind. They spoke of the danger, of what might come if a giant's heart tethered itself to something so fragile. The elders murmured of old tales, of giants who had fallen in love before, only to be destroyed by it. The mountains, though quiet and seemingly stable, began to shift subtly. The stones seemed uneasy, vibrating ever so slightly beneath the feet of the giants. The wilderness seemed more watchful now, as if it could sense the disturbance in its midst. But despite the warnings, neither could resist the pull. They loved each other too deeply to part. And so, they clung tighter to their secret moments, the quiet walks under the moonlight, the shared laughter that echoed softly in the valleys. Yet, even love couldn't erase the growing pain. For as time passed, their worlds began to push back. The stones themselves seemed to rebel against the bond. One night, a storm came, fierce and sudden. The winds howled through the mountains, shaking the very ground beneath them. Lightning struck the tallest peak, a deafening crack that rumbled through the valley, as though the mountain itself could no longer contain the anger that had built within it. The giant and his mortal lover watched from the safety of a sheltered cave, their hands gripping tightly as the earth trembled. The message was clear: nature itself could no longer remain silent. Days turned into weeks, and the tension grew unbearable. The giants, once protective of the land, began to retreat. They whispered dark warnings of forces beyond their control that could no longer be ignored. The mountains, once steady, seemed restless, shifting beneath the weight of something they could not understand. Even the stars, once their steady guides, seemed dimmer, distant. The mortal, though unaware of the growing unrest, could feel it in the air, an unease that tightened around her chest like a storm preparing to break. She questioned the giant in quiet desperation, wondering if they could ever find a way to mend the widening chasm between their lives. But no words seemed capable of easing the tension, of silencing the deeper fear that began to creep into their shared dreams. One fateful night, the mountain spoke in a way neither could ignore. The earth split open, a gaping wound in the rock that bled fiery red. The ground shook violently, and the wind tore through the valley with a ferocity that could not be contained. The giant's heart, long tethered to both love and duty, wrenched in two. He turned to his mortal lover, his eyes filled with anguish, with a sadness that no stone or mountain could ever withstand. "We must part," he whispered, his voice breaking like the crumbling rocks around them. The land cannot hold this. It will tear us apart if we stay. For the first time, she saw the cost, the depth of what their love had unleashed. Tears streamed down her face, and she clung to him, desperate to hold onto the fleeting moments that might still remain. But the land roared in defiance, rejecting their bond. The mountain, once silent and steady, now trembled under the weight of the curse they had unknowingly placed upon it. Their farewell was swift and brutal. The giant, once towering and unshakable, knelt before her, his massive frame bowing low. "Go," he commanded, his voice heavy with pain. "Run far from here, to where the mountains do not see you, where the stones do not carry my name." She clung to him, her heart shattering. "But I love you," she sobbed, clinging to the truth that had always been enough. Surely, it had to be enough. Yet even love was not enough to change the path they were now on. The ground shuddered again, a warning too dire to ignore. The giant, heartbroken and bound by duty, rose to his full height one last time. "Go," he commanded, his voice a thunderous roar that seemed to echo through the heavens. And so, with a broken heart and tears that fell like rivers, she turned away from the only place she had ever felt truly alive. The mountain swallowed her whole, and she disappeared into the unknown, leaving behind only memories and a heart that would forever ache with the weight of what they had lost. The giant watched her retreat into the shadows, his stone eyes dull with grief. The earth beneath him trembled one last time before settling once more, calm, but forever changed. Their love had not just strained the land, it had scarred it, leaving a permanent fissure in the mountains that would never fully heal. From that night forward, both their worlds seemed different. The mountains grew quieter, the winds less gentle. And though years passed, the memory of that love never faded, not in the hearts of those who spoke of it in hushed whispers, nor in the eyes of the giants, who remembered the price they had all paid for one brief, aching moment of connection. Even now, on quiet nights, travelers speak of seeing strange lights flicker in the distance, lights that seem too bright, too distant, like a reflection of a love long past, forever carried across the sky. And in those moments, perhaps the mountains themselves remember the tale of a giant and a mortal whose love once stirred the stars. The quiet seemed to stretch across the valley like a shroud, heavy and oppressive. The stone giants had always been a silent force, bound together by unspoken rules, by shared purpose, and by the deep connection they had to the land. For centuries, they had stood as one, their strength a reflection of the mountains themselves, enduring and timeless. But something had begun to shift, an undercurrent of unrest that none could ignore. It began as whispers, soft and cautious, carried on the wind through the crevices of the mountains. Giants who had once stood side by side now found themselves questioning each other, growing distant. Their unity, once unshakable, started to splinter. It wasn't long before the whispers grew louder, turning into heated arguments that echoed through the valleys. The trust that had once kept them whole was eroding, leaving behind seeds of doubt and suspicion. Among them, there was a figure, one of the oldest, strongest, and most revered giants, someone who had always been seen as a leader, a guardian of the land. But now, a shadow seemed to have fallen over him, something darker than time itself. His name was Varun, and his once immovable frame had begun to tremble beneath the weight of something he would never speak aloud: ambition. Varun had always been proud of his position, proud of the way the mountains leaned into his strength. But the years had dulled the once clear path he followed. His vision, once clear and steady, had become clouded. Slowly, a hunger began to creep into his heart, a hunger for power, for control. And like a poison, it began to spread among others, infecting those he could sway with promises of a new order. There were others, strong, influential giants, who began to follow him, sensing the shift, sensing the cracks that had begun to form. One by one, they turned away from the unity they had once shared, moving in silence, plotting in the shadows. They spoke of change, but not the kind that would strengthen their bond. They spoke of domination, of rule, of tearing apart the old ways to create something stronger, something that would elevate them above the rest. Soon, the mountains themselves seemed to feel the divide. The air grew colder, the stones more brittle beneath the giants' feet. It was as though the very foundation of the land trembled in response to the growing chaos among them. The rocks that had once stood as steady witnesses began to shatter, fragments splitting into jagged pieces that refused to stay whole. One fateful day, the betrayal came. It was sudden, swift, a brutal clash between those who still clung to the old ways and those who had begun to march to a different beat. The once unshakable bond fractured, and the giants turned against each other, their immense forms colliding with deafening force. Varun led the charge, his voice ringing out above the noise, commanding others to rise, to assert dominance over the land. He had become consumed, no longer content with simply standing as part of the earth, but to conquer it, to bend it to his will. And those who had followed him, once proud of the unity they had upheld, now wielded their strength in ways that would bring only destruction. The once peaceful valleys, filled with the silent presence of giants, now trembled with the clash of stone against stone. Fists collided with fists, rocks shattered beneath the sheer force, and the mountains themselves groaned in protest. It was no longer just a war of giants, it was a war that shook the very foundations of the earth. Among the chaos, the air grew heavy, filled with anguish, with the sound of betrayed hearts. Giants who had once fought side by side now turned their backs, casting off old alliances as though they had never existed. Trust was gone. And as the battle raged, shadows crept over the landscape, dark, choking shadows that spread across the mountains, darkening even the skies. The consequences were devastating. The once fertile lands, teeming with life, began to wither. Trees once lush and green were now twisted and barren. Streams that had once sung their songs to the mountains fell silent, dried up under the weight of grief. The mountains, once proud and eternal, seemed to shudder beneath the pain, unable to hold the giants' hatred any longer. Even those who did not wish for war, the elders, the keepers of ancient wisdom, found themselves powerless. Their pleas, their warnings, were ignored. The giants, once bound by tradition and respect, had let their anger consume them. And in the end, the mountains were left scarred, cracks running deep through the rock, fissures that would never fully close. Time passed, but the scars never healed. The mountains bore witness to the aftermath, the quiet broken only by the echoes of footsteps once united now fading into solitude. The giants, once one with the land, now wandered alone, their hearts heavy with betrayal. And as the nights grew longer, travelers would often speak of strange sights in the sky, an illusion, perhaps, or something far more real. They would describe flickers of light, strange formations that seemed to twist and turn against the darkened heavens. The shapes resembled giants, shadows of immense figures standing together in defiance, though no longer whole, no longer united. The air would grow colder around these sights, and some said they could feel the earth tremble beneath them, almost as though the mountains themselves were still mourning the loss. It was a reminder, perhaps, of what once was, and what could have been. A story that passed from one generation to the next, of giants who let ambition, greed, and betrayal tear them apart. And as the mountains stand silent once more, the echoes of that betrayal continue to haunt the land, a warning to those who might forget, unity, once broken, may never be whole again. The first signs were subtle, just a soft shifting in the air, a quietness where once there had been a steady, almost unending hum of life in the Misty Mountains. Travelers began to speak of shadows that moved too quickly, figures that appeared at the edges of their vision, only to vanish before they could be certain of what they saw. Whispers spread, tales told around fire pits, tales of giants disappearing, stepping out of view as if they had never truly belonged to the land. At first, many dismissed these stories as nothing more than the imaginings of a tired mind or old legends, passed down like seeds blown on the wind. Yet, year after year, more sightings of these giants turned to sightings of their absence. The once towering figures, strong and steady, seemed to have quietly slipped away, vanishing into the mist that clung to the mountains like a thick, shifting veil. And as the giants faded from sight, so too did their influence. The land they had shaped, the mountains they had protected, began to change in ways that were impossible to ignore. Where once the valleys echoed with the sound of boulders rolling and stones striking stones, there was now an eerie silence, a stillness that seemed almost alive, as if the mountains themselves were holding their breath. The air grew colder, the fog thicker, and the foothills where travelers once ventured became treacherous. The Misty Mountains, which had once been a beacon of life and strength, began to twist and fade into something different, a place of shadows and forgotten paths. Rivers that had once carved deep grooves into the earth now slowed, meandering aimlessly before vanishing beneath layers of stone. Forests that thrived in the giants' presence began to wither, their leaves brittle and sparse. Some say the giants didn't vanish, only withdrew, retreating into a space that only they could access, hidden from the eyes of those who couldn't truly comprehend their existence. Legend spoke of deep crevices, winding caves, and vast chambers that even the strongest of men couldn't find. It was whispered that the giants hadn't disappeared at all, but rather stepped into a realm where time itself moved differently, where they could exist beyond the reach of the world they once knew. They had simply ceased to be part of the physical plane, leaving behind only the memories they had carved into the land. Others believed they had been swallowed whole by the mountains themselves, absorbed into the very stones that had once carried their footsteps. And indeed, if you stood at the right places, in the right moments, you could almost feel it, the presence of something lingering, something vast and ancient, just beyond reach. A sense that the giants had left, but left a part of themselves behind, a mark etched into the soul of the mountains. Stones seemed to hum faintly, as though responding to unseen forces, shifting and creaking under the weight of that ancient energy. Yet, even in their absence, the giants seemed to leave behind something more, something intangible, something felt rather than seen. It was as though the mountains themselves missed them, mourned their departure. The once vibrant peaks, crowned in gleaming snow, now seemed hollow, empty. No longer did the mountains stand proud and untouched. Instead, they sagged, weighed down by something unseen. The shadows deepened within every crevice, the wind carried a heavier chill, and even the sun seemed reluctant to break through the clouds. For some, it was comforting to think the giants hadn't truly gone, that they had merely shifted, biding their time until the world could remember them again, until someone, somewhere, could reconnect with that ancient power. But as generations passed and no word returned, no sign appeared to suggest they would return, that hope began to fade. The landscape was left scarred, not just by the battles and fractures of the giants' past, but by the quiet absence of their once steady presence. The mountains that had thrived under their guidance now seemed listless, as if the very land itself had lost something vital, something that had kept the balance between stone and earth, life and death. Without the giants to shape the winds and sculpt the mountains, the place seemed adrift, untethered from the forces that once held it together. And so, the mountains remained, silent, mysterious, caught in a time that refused to move forward or backward. A place where few dared to venture, but many spoke of in hushed tones, as if afraid to disturb something they couldn't quite name. Travelers would tread carefully through the fog, eyes darting through the haze, half expecting to catch a glimpse of those giants once more, though they knew deep down that what they sought was no longer there. Maybe the giants still lived, deep in the heart of the mountains, waiting for the right moment to rise again, to reclaim what had once been theirs. Or perhaps they had truly vanished, leaving only the echoes of their power, an imprint carved into the land, into the very sky, into the dreams of those who still dared to look up. Either way, the Misty Mountains had changed, and the stories of the giants had shifted with them, becoming something both legend and memory, something beautiful and bittersweet. And in that void left by their absence, the mountains grew quieter still, a place where the air seemed heavy, and the only sound was the faintest whisper, the memory of giants who once walked these peaks, whose strength once shaped the world around them. The mountains stretched before them, tall, unforgiving, and shrouded in an ever-present fog that seemed to seep into the very bones of the land. Stories of giants had long echoed through these valleys, but now, as they trudged deeper into the Misty Mountains, an eerie stillness clung to the air. It was a silence unlike any other, one that felt heavy, as if the mountains themselves were holding their breath. They didn't see it at first, but the moment their eyes did catch it, they couldn't look away. Jagged rocks rose from the ground, standing impossibly still. At first glance, they seemed like just ordinary stone, weathered by countless years. But there was something different. A certain stillness, as though the rocks themselves had been shaped by something, by a force far greater than time or nature. Shadows curled around their edges, casting long, dark shapes onto the ground. Then, as they moved closer, the truth became clearer. These weren't just rocks. These were giants, turned to stone. The legend spoke of a time when the giants walked proudly among the peaks, their footsteps shaking the very ground beneath them. They were mighty, so immense and powerful that they seemed almost otherworldly. But something had changed. Whether it was a curse or the result of their own recklessness, no one knew for sure. The stories told of a moment when the skies darkened and the winds howled louder than ever before. A single flash of light had split the air, and then silence. The giants, who once moved with ease, became still. Stiff. Motionless. Frozen mid-step, as though caught in some ancient, unending pause. Over time, the land around them slowly crept in, covering them with moss and dirt, hiding their forms beneath a layer of stone. Yet, in certain places, the truth lingered, quietly visible for those willing to seek it out. Some say they turned to stone because they grew too proud, too eager to challenge the gods themselves. Others believe it was a punishment, a reckoning for their greed, or perhaps for seeking power that wasn't meant to be theirs. The result, though, was the same. The giants, once towering protectors of the land, were frozen, caught in the eternal stillness of stone. Their faces twisted into expressions of awe, or rage, or sorrow. It wasn't just their bodies that lay immobile, the land around them seemed to carry the weight of their transformation. The mountains grew colder, the trees stretched taller, their leaves rustling faintly in the breeze. And beneath the surface, it was said, the echoes of their cries still lingered, hidden in the very stones that encased them. The sites where these giants now lay turned into something sacred, something almost untouchable. Locals avoided them, speaking of bad luck should one venture too close. Yet, some couldn't resist the pull. They ventured out into the mountains, guided by nothing but old tales and whispers of the giants. And there, hidden among boulders and outcroppings, they found what the stories had foretold. Stone giants, silent and unmoving, but undeniably present. One such place stood deep within a narrow valley. The stones here were arranged in a circle, each towering block a figure once larger than life. Fingers carved into fists, shoulders tense beneath the heavy weight of something long gone. They had stood there for centuries, watching over the valley they once protected, now nothing but immobile statues, frozen in eternal vigilance. It was said that if you approached quietly, you could almost feel it, the pulse of energy that once surrounded them. Not a physical energy, but something deeper, almost spiritual. Some believed that the giants' spirits still remained, trapped inside the very stones they had become. And in moments of perfect stillness, you could hear it, the faintest whisper, as though the giants were trying to speak, trying to reach beyond the confines of their stone prison. Another site lay farther up the mountain, at the edge of an ancient plateau where the winds howled endlessly. Here, the giants' forms stretched high into the sky, their faces carved in a way that seemed forever etched in pain, eyes wide, mouths frozen in silent shouts. The legend said they had once stood together, bound by a shared destiny, facing off against an enemy that even gods feared. But something had gone wrong, betrayal, perhaps, or perhaps their pride had led them astray. The air in these places was different, cooler, with a sharp tang of something almost magical. Stones that lay scattered on the ground glimmered faintly when touched, catching the light in strange, shifting patterns. And as the days turned into nights, strange sounds could sometimes be heard, soft whispers that came from the rocks themselves. Was it the memory of their laughter, their voices, or something else? No one could be sure. But those who had spent too much time there often claimed to feel the stones responding, to feel an invisible pulse beneath their fingertips, as if the mountains themselves still held echoes of the giants' power. Some said these sites had become places of longing, a space where the giants still longed to be free. Others believed they had retreated into the stones, their strength too great to be let loose into a world that had long forgotten them. Either way, the mountains whispered secrets that only a few dared to listen to. And as travelers ventured deeper into these places, they would come away shaken, haunted by what they had seen, by what they could almost feel. The mountains, silent though they were, carried the weight of the giants' transformation. Their absence hung heavily over the landscape, a reminder of what once was. And in those sacred, hidden places, the giants' legacy seemed to pulse, their essence forever captured in stone, lingering like an invisible force. Some believed they would awaken one day, but until then, all that remained were the tales, the hushed stories of giants turned to stone, and the mountains they once walked. And as the mist curled around the peaks, as the wind carried the echoes of what had been, the mountains continued to watch, forever holding the memory of the giants who had once walked among them. The stories lingered, like shadows stretching across time, whispered in countless tongues around fires and under moonlit skies. Giants, beings of immeasurable size and strength, their presence towering over mortals and gods alike. It was as though humanity, scattered across continents and centuries, had all peered into the same dream and seen these colossal figures standing there, watching, waiting. In the cold mountains, the stone giants were guardians of the peaks, their stoic forms etched with timeless endurance. Their silent watch seemed eternal, their every move heavy with meaning, their stillness weighted with sorrow. Yet, as you listen closely, their tales echo far beyond the Misty Mountains. They are not alone in the vast tapestry of human myth. Giants appear in every corner of the world, their shapes shifting, their stories weaving through history like threads of a shared memory. Across the sea, in the icy expanse of the Norse sagas, the Jotnar stood as ancient forces of chaos. They were wild and untamed, born from the very void of creation, their strength a challenge to even the gods of Asgard. Frost and fire coursed through their veins, and yet, in their might, there was also tragedy. Stories spoke of Skadi, the giantess who walked the line between her kin and the gods, her heart heavy with grief and vengeance. She sought retribution for her father's death, but found herself caught in the strange pull of love and loyalty. Giants, it seemed, carried not only their strength but also their wounds. Farther south, the Greek myths spoke of the Gigantes, children of the earth itself. Born from Gaia's fury, they rose against the heavens, their enormous forms striving to overthrow the Olympian gods. But even in their rebellion, there was a glimmer of humanity. They were not mindless brutes, but beings of passion and purpose. Some believed that their battle, the Gigantomachy, was not just a clash of power but a reflection of the human struggle, our endless fight between chaos and order, between reaching for the skies and being pulled back to the earth. The echoes of giants reach even to the dense forests of Central America, where the Aztecs spoke of the Quinametsin. These were the builders of the great cities, colossal beings who walked the earth before humanity. Yet, their strength could not save them from their fate. They were overthrown, their ruins left to crumble into the jungle, reminders of their once mighty presence. There, among the vines and the stone, their legacy lingers, a haunting reminder of what happens when even giants fall. In Polynesian legends, the stories of the giant Maui emerge. A demigod in stature and power, Maui's feats are grand, his adventures bold. He pulled islands from the ocean, slowed the sun, and challenged the very forces of nature. Yet, for all his triumphs, Maui's story ends in mortality, a sharp reminder that even giants, gods, and heroes are not immune to the finality of life. His laughter and defiance still echo through the islands, carried on the winds that sweep across the waves. In every culture, the giants serve as mirrors, reflecting the values, fears, and dreams of the people who told their tales. They are protectors and destroyers, creators and adversaries, their roles shifting with the needs of the story. In the Misty Mountains, the stone giants embody endurance and sorrow, their bodies carved from the very rocks they guard. But their kin across the world show the many faces of these towering figures, beings of incredible power, yet burdened with flaws and fates that echo our own. And perhaps that is why their stories endure. Giants, for all their might, are still bound by the same threads that weave through human lives. They face betrayal, loss, longing, and sometimes redemption. They are larger than life, but never beyond its reach. Their footsteps may shake the ground, but their hearts beat with emotions we recognize. As the winds carry the whispers of their tales, as the mountains stand in solemn remembrance, one cannot help but wonder, do the giants across the world share the same origin? Are they fragments of an ancient truth, scattered across the earth and reshaped by human imagination? Or are they something more, something that binds humanity together, like the pulse of the earth itself, beating in the rhythm of their footsteps? The stories do not stop here. The giant's presence continues to ripple outward, like a stone cast into still water, each wave carrying their legacy farther. And in the quiet moments, as the mist thickens and the mountains grow silent, one question lingers: what do they see when they look down upon us? The mountains hummed with an ancient resonance, a vibration too deep for mortal ears yet felt in the bones of all who tread their slopes. These peaks, weathered by time and war, stood as silent witnesses to the unfolding of Middle-earth's most pivotal events. Yet there, in the shadows of their great ridges, another tale lingered, one of beings whose strength rivaled the storms, whose presence shaped the land itself. The stone giants, enigmatic and mighty, had more ties to the rings of power than the songs dared to admit. When the great rings were forged, the fires of Mount Doom blazed with a ferocity that could be felt across the lands. The creation of these powerful artifacts was not a solitary act. Whispers spoke of strange alliances, of forces called upon to aid in secret, and of powers that had slumbered long in the deep places of the earth. The stone giants, creatures of towering might and elemental force, were said to have felt the forging of the rings like a ripple through the very stone of their being. Some claimed that Sauron himself sought their aid, drawn to their strength and knowledge of the mountains. What better allies for his designs than those who could bend the cliffs and shape the earth with their massive hands? Yet, the giants were no ordinary servants to command. They were ancient, older than many of the realms that rose and fell around them, and they bore a wisdom that made them wary of such alliances. Still, there were murmurs of giants who turned away from their kind, tempted by the allure of the rings and the power they promised. In the high, storm-laden peaks, battles were fought not just of swords and arrows but of wills. The giants who resisted Sauron's call found themselves pitted against their own, their thunderous clashes shaking the mountains to their roots. What might drove those who aligned with the Dark Lord? Perhaps it was the promise of dominion, of carving their own kingdoms from the earth. Or perhaps it was fear, the same fear that had bent the will of so many others, fear of a power too great to defy. Legends whispered of a time when one of the rings, a lesser ring forgotten in the grand schemes of the 9, the 7, and the 3, found its way into the hands of a stone giant. It was a ring of subtle influence, crafted to sway those tied to the earth. This giant, whose name was lost to the ages, became consumed by its pull. His once steadfast heart turned to ambition and rage. The valleys he roamed became desolate, his footsteps leaving scars in the land that no rain could wash away. Yet, even amid the corruption, there were glimmers of resistance. A small band of giants, untouched by the lure of the rings, rose against their fallen kin. Their battle, fought in a storm that seemed summoned by the heavens themselves, became the stuff of legend. Lightning split the sky, illuminating their colossal forms locked in combat. When the storm cleared, the betrayer was gone, his fate unknown, and the ring said to be buried deep within the mountain that had swallowed him. But what of the giants who remained neutral, those who neither sided with Sauron nor fought against him? Their silence spoke volumes. They watched from the peaks, their eyes filled with the weight of foresight, as kingdoms clashed and the world beneath them burned. Perhaps they understood what the other races could not, that the power of the rings would not last, that the chaos they wrought would eventually fade into the earth's memory. Or perhaps they simply waited, knowing that time would erode all things, even the works of the greatest. The Misty Mountains, where the giants dwelled, became both a refuge and a battleground during the War of the Ring. Travelers spoke of shadowy figures seen during the storms, of boulders that seemed to move of their own accord, blocking paths and shielding those pursued by the enemy. Whether these were acts of defiance or indifference is a question that has no answer, for the giants left no trace of their intentions. Their motives, like their forms, remain shrouded in mist and stone. In the wake of the One Ring's destruction, the mountains seemed quieter, as if the giants themselves had retreated further into obscurity. Yet their absence was not an end, but a pause. The echoes of their influence lingered in the reshaped valleys, in the whispered tales of travelers who claimed to hear their voices carried on the wind, and in the heavy stillness that descended over the peaks. What role did the giants truly play in the grander mythology of Middle-earth? Were they mere observers, or did their unseen hands guide the fate of the world in ways unknown to mortals? Their story intertwines with the rings, their presence felt in the thunder that still rumbles across the mountains, and the stone that bears their silent mark. And as the mountains stand, ever watchful, one can almost hear the faint tremor of their song, a reminder that some forces, no matter how quiet or forgotten, never truly fade. The wind howled through the Misty Mountains, carrying with it whispers older than the stones themselves. It was a sound that seemed to hold the weight of voices long silenced, giants who once strode across the peaks, whose origins, shrouded in mystery, pointed to powers far beyond mortal comprehension. The air felt alive, tingling with the faintest traces of ancient hands that may have shaped the giants from earth and stone, the same hands that crafted the pillars of Arda itself. Some claimed the stone giants were no mere accidents of the world but deliberate creations, shaped by the Vala, Middle-earth's immortal stewards. All the Smith, known for his unparalleled craftsmanship, was often named in these murmurs. It was said that in the earliest days, before the children of Iluvatar had awakened, All's restless hands sought to mold life. The dwarves were the result of his first great act of creation, but what if they were not his only work? What if, in his experimentation with the raw power of stone and mountain, he breathed life into something even mightier, beings of colossal strength and unyielding form, born from the bones of Arda itself? The idea was as haunting as it was beautiful. Giants, towering and unshakable, might have been envisioned as protectors of the natural world, a reflection of All's respect for the earth. But All, with his love for crafting, often created things beyond his control. Were the giants one such creation, their purpose lost in the passage of time, leaving them to wander aimlessly in the mountains, forgotten by their maker? Then there was Yavanna, the giver of fruits, whose love for all living things extended to the smallest leaf and the tallest tree. Yavanna's hands shaped the flora and fauna of Middle-earth, her heart aching for their protection against the greed of others. Could it have been she who called the giants into being, imbuing them with a fierce, protective spirit? Some legends hinted at this, painting the giants as guardians of the mountains, protectors of the high places where her forests grew wild and unspoiled. The thought of Yavanna breathing life into the stone stirred emotions that felt almost tangible, as though her touch lingered still in the quiet groves and hidden valleys of the Misty Mountains. The giant's roars, echoing like rolling thunder, might have been her voice, reminding the world that the earth, too, had champions. The idea was as comforting as it was tragic, for if they were her protectors, what did their dwindling presence say about the state of the world they were meant to defend? Theories about the giants' origins danced like shadows, refusing to solidify into fact. Were they shaped by the will of All, their massive forms a reflection of his strength? Or were they children of Yavanna's love, their hearts tied to the wild places of the world? Perhaps, as some whispered, they were born of both, a union of stone and life, a marriage of All's craft and Yavanna's nurturing hand. Such a thought was almost too beautiful to bear, for it painted the giants not as creatures of chaos, but as beings of balance, embodying both creation and protection. But if the giants were tied to the Vala, why had they been left to fade into obscurity? This question lingered like a thorn, its answer elusive. Some believed the Vala had turned their gaze from Middle-earth after the rise of the Dark Lords, their hearts burdened by the corruption that spread across the land. Others whispered that the giants themselves had chosen to step back, their purpose fulfilled or their spirits broken by the unrelenting march of time and war. In the stillness of the mountains, where the air seemed heavier, one could almost feel the presence of these towering beings. Perhaps they were not gone but merely waiting, their slumber a choice rather than a consequence. If they were indeed tied to the Vala, their disappearance might not be an abandonment but a retreat, a decision to watch and wait, biding their time until the world called for them once more. The idea that the giants were still there, hidden yet watchful, brought a strange comfort. It suggested that the threads of their story were not yet cut, that the echoes of All's hammer and Yavanna's song still reverberated through the stones. And as the wind carried those faint, ancient whispers through the mountains, one could not help but wonder, if the giants were to wake, what would they remember? What would they reveal about the forces that shaped them, about the hands that molded their massive forms and set them loose upon the world? The questions hung in the air, unanswered yet alive, pulling the mind to the next chapter in this endless, intertwined tale. The flicker of a screen in a dimly lit room casts long shadows, and within those shadows, giants stir. They stride across landscapes of ink and imagination, their forms shifting and evolving, yet their essence remains, beings of might, mystery, and emotion that reach into the depths of our shared humanity. Something about them grips us, perhaps it's their towering presence or the way they carry the weight of ancient sorrow. They seem more than characters. They feel like echoes, reverberations of something older, something we've always known but can't quite place. In the pages of books, in the frames of movies, and in the immersive worlds of games, the giants of modern tales loom large. Each retelling shapes them anew, yet a thread of familiarity runs through it all. Writers and creators draw from the well of old myths, where giants once hurled boulders in the Misty Mountains or stood, unmoving, as stone sentinels. But these modern giants are not mere copies. They carry within them the hopes and fears of the present, refracted through the prism of time. There's a scene, vivid and unforgettable, from a story where a giant towers over a battlefield, eyes brimming with sadness rather than rage. He doesn't want to fight, but the world has given him no choice. The filmmakers linger on his face, craggy, weathered, yet deeply human. It's a moment that strikes like lightning, reminding us that giants are not just forces of destruction, they are beings with stories, scars, and hearts that ache just like ours. In fantasy literature, giants often stand as metaphors for the unimaginable, forces of nature, the weight of history, or the inescapable march of time. Authors use their vastness to remind us of how small we are, yet their emotions make them relatable, even painfully so. A young boy faces a towering figure in one such tale, not with fear but with empathy. The giant speaks in a voice that rumbles like thunder, revealing a past filled with loss and betrayal. It's a conversation that lingers long after the final page, leaving a sense of connection that defies the gap in size and power. In modern storytelling, giants have taken on surprising roles. They are no longer just the terrifying villains of old fables. Instead, they are protectors, teachers, and even reluctant allies. A video game lets players befriend a lonely giant, his hulking form shielding them from danger. The way he moves, slow, deliberate, tells of a life lived cautiously, as if every step risks breaking the fragile world around him. Players feel his care in every action, and it's impossible not to grow attached, to mourn when the inevitable tragedy strikes. And yet, not all modern giants are gentle. Some carry the darkness of their mythological roots. They are nightmares given form, reminders that power without restraint can lead to ruin. A series of novels imagines a world where giants, awakened from their slumber, bring chaos to human cities. Their footsteps are earthquakes, their roars hurricanes. It's a tale of hubris and fear, but even here, the giants are not wholly monstrous. Through glimpses of their ancient lives, readers see fragments of who they were before the world turned against them. Interpretations of giants have also ventured into unexpected terrains. In contemporary poetry, they've become symbols of resilience, standing tall against storms both literal and figurative. In animated films, they've taken on whimsical, almost childlike qualities, inviting laughter and wonder. In every medium, creators find new facets to explore, new ways to make these ancient figures resonate with modern audiences. Perhaps the most poignant modern tale features a lone giant wandering a dying world. His size is both a blessing and a curse. He can see farther than any other being, but what he sees is heartbreak, a landscape stripped of life, rivers turned to dust. Yet, even in his despair, he carries a seed, cradled in his massive hands. It's a powerful image, one that lingers like a haunting melody. The giant, a symbol of strength, becomes a bearer of hope, his every step a prayer for renewal. As the credits roll on such stories, one can't help but feel that the giants of modern tales are mirrors, reflecting the complexity of our own existence. They embody the contradictions within us: strength and vulnerability, fear and courage, destruction and creation. They remind us of the weight of the past, the challenges of the present, and the hope that the future might get hold. And as the screen fades to black or the final page is turned, a question hangs in the air, unspoken but powerful. What if the giants are still watching, waiting for their stories to intertwine with ours once more? A sudden rumble shakes the earth beneath your feet, faint but unmistakable. It could be thunder, or it could be something far older, stirring after centuries of silence. The wind carries a whisper, a low hum that feels like it's alive, like it's calling to something hidden deep in the heart of the mountains. You stop, holding your breath, wondering if the stories are more than tales meant to entertain restless minds. For a moment, it's as if the world holds its breath with you, waiting for a truth too immense to be ignored. There are those who claim the giants never truly left. Perhaps they rest beneath layers of rock and snow, their massive forms camouflaged against the mountainsides. When the storms rage and boulders tumble, some say it's not the whim of nature but the restless shifting of their immense bodies. Others insist they've gone into hiding, retreating to caverns so deep that no mortal light has ever touched them, choosing slumber over the chaos of the changing world. Yet, the question remains, could they rise again? The thought is both terrifying and electrifying. What would it mean if the stone giants of the Misty Mountains returned? Would they be the same ancient beings, carrying the weight of time in their withered faces? Or would they awaken changed, molded by the centuries of quiet isolation? The idea lingers in the mind, refusing to be dismissed as mere fantasy. The fascination never fades because the giants represent something primal, something we feel in the marrow of our bones, but cannot fully articulate. They are the embodiment of the unknowable, the guardians of a world beyond the reach of ordinary life. And yet, there's a yearning tied to their legend, a desire to stand before them, to look up into eyes as vast as the sky and see something ancient reflected back. In the dead of winter, when the world is wrapped in silence and the snow falls in great, muffling waves, some travelers swear they've heard the giants' laughter. It rolls across the peaks, deep and resonant, but not unkind. It's as though they remember a time when the world was wild and untamed, and they were its masters. Perhaps they laugh because they've seen it all before, kingdoms rising and falling, men building their fleeting empires on the backs of dreams as fragile as spider's silk. There's a haunting beauty in their imagined return. Would they come as harbingers of destruction, their footsteps shaking the earth, or as protectors, guiding a world lost in its own chaos? Some say they might be both, unpredictable forces that could either shield or shatter. The sheer unpredictability of such power is what makes the thought impossible to ignore. It's not just about the giants themselves, but about what they represent, a reminder of how small we are in the face of the vast, untamed forces of existence. In quiet villages nestled at the edges of the Misty Mountains, the elders tell stories to wide-eyed children about nights when the moonlight catches the edges of something massive and moving. They speak of shadows that don't belong to trees or rocks, of shapes that glide through the mist with an elegance that seems out of place for being so large. The children shiver, clutching their blankets tighter, but they never ask for the stories to stop. There's a thrill in the fear, a spark that keeps the legends alive. It's not just the mountains that hold these whispers, though. Across the world, people feel the pull of the giants' myths, drawn to the idea of something so immense, so timeless. In cities far removed from the Misty Mountains, artists paint murals of towering figures silhouetted against fiery skies, their hands outstretched as if reaching for something we can't see. Writers craft tales of encounters with beings whose voices shake the stars, whose sorrow feels deeper than the ocean. The giants live on in these creations, eternal and unyielding. And then there are the dreamers, those who claim they've seen the giants, not with their waking eyes, but in the quiet depths of their slumber. They speak of walking through endless fields of stone, where figures as tall as mountains rise in solemn silence. Their dreams feel more real than life itself, and they wake with a strange longing, a sense of having touched something vast and unknowable. Whether these dreams are the product of overactive imaginations or something more is a question left unanswered, but they add another layer to the giants' enduring allure. There's a particular tale that refuses to fade, a story passed from mouth to mouth, each teller adding their own twist. It speaks of a lone traveler caught in a storm, the kind of tempest that turns the world white and makes every direction look the same. Lost and freezing, the traveler stumbles upon a cave, its entrance hidden behind a curtain of snow. Inside, he finds warmth, not the warmth of fire but of life. As his eyes adjust to the darkness, he realizes he's not alone. A figure looms in the shadows, impossibly large, its features carved with age and sorrow. The traveler claims the giant spoke, though not with words. It was as if its presence was a language, filling the air with meaning too deep for speech. It didn't threaten, didn't harm, but it also didn't linger. When the storm passed, the traveler found himself outside the cave, with no memory of how he'd gotten there. He never found the cave again, though he searched for it every year until the day he died. Perhaps the giants are waiting for something, a sign, a moment, or a reason to step into the world once more. Or perhaps they're already here, hidden in plain sight, watching and listening as the world spins on without them. Whatever the truth may be, the giants remain a presence that cannot be ignored. They are the thunder in the distance, the shadow on the mountainside, the whisper in the wind that carries more than words. And as long as their stories are told, they will never truly vanish.